right. So we've covered the attachment theory of love. Let's talk about Robert Sternberg's triangular theory of love. In his model, he says that there are three components that can make up any kind of love that you might be experiencing. The three components are intimacy, commitment, and passion. So let's go ahead and look at these and see if we can sort of understand what Sternberg meant by different kinds of love. So if all you have is intimacy, intimacy would be referring to emotional intimacy, sharing of information about ourselves, getting to know a person, and as you know, the details of that person, right? If all you have is that kind of intimacy, he says that the kind of love that you're experiencing is called liking. Really common for friends to have this kind of love for each other, or acquaintances, right? Like as we're getting to know each other, I'm liking you more and more, right? We have more and more things in common, or I like your worldview, or I like your taste in music, or as I'm getting to know you, I'm realizing that I like you more. Commitment, he was referring to getting married, but he's kind of expanded that out to being declaring in public that we are committed to each other in some fashion, that everybody knows that we are together, we're a partnership. If all you have is commitment, he called that empty love. You have this something that's tying you together, but you don't have intimacy and you don't have passion, so you're left with what he calls empty love. His assumption was that a partnership, whether it's friends or it's a romantic relationship, for us to end up in empty love, we probably started out with either intimacy or passion or both, and sort of lost it along the way, right? And all we're left with is the commitment that we made to each other. But I'd like to point out, cross-culturally, there are situations where it actually goes in the reverse, where people make a commitment first, and then the assumption is that they'll get to know each other, that they'll develop that intimacy, and that they will develop passion for each other over time. And so, arranged marriages around the world are built on the concept of making the commitment first and then trusting that the intimacy and the passion will develop after. So he was definitely arguing from a very Western perspective that the only way you could end up in empty love is by having lost the other parts. So I don't think he was considering other cultures. Now, if all you have is passion, and now this is what we're talking about with like the physical fire, right? Passion is where you're actually attracted to each other and really, have that physical spark. He said, if all you have is passion, you are in what he called infatuation. And if you were ever a teenager who had a crush on some celebrity, you know what I'm talking about, because, passion for that celebrity is based on what we think the intimacy would be like, that they would get to know us and they would love us, and that I would get to know them and I would love them even more the better I got to know them, right? Like we're assuming that the intimacy would always go well, but we don't have any, or we're just projecting it. We assume that they share our same likes and dislikes, and we assume a bunch of stuff, but we really don't have that intimacy. And then we certainly don't have any kind of commitment to, this celebrity that we have a crush on. But we think it would come, right? We think that, well, if they got to know us, they would feel as passionately as we do. They would want to get to know us intimately as much as we want to get to know them. And then they would ultimately want to make a commitment to us. That's the logic of the crush. But honestly, all that's there is that passion, this draw to be with the person. And usually it's based on, I like the way the person looks, or I like the way that they behave, or, we feel like there's some kind of spark that is sort of that passionate spark. So now you can combine the different components to get something more complex. So you can combine you can combine intimacy and commitment and develop what's called companionate love. Again, Sternberg was kind of assuming that you would end up in companionate love if you actually had passion as part of your relationship, but you lost it for some reason. And I think he forgot that maybe being male, maybe he doesn't recognize that, especially for female best friendships, they could probably be characterized as companionate love. Female best friends oftentimes make declarations in front of all their other friends. We are best friends. I know my high school best friend and I, we bought a necklace together, and it was a little heart and it said best friends on it, but then you break it apart and one of you wears one half and the other one wears the other half. My half said be fry and her half said ends. And, only if you put it back together can you read it. That's a declaration to everyone else that we are legit each other's best friend. Like, we know each other, we have that intimacy of, having shared hopes and dreams, plans for the future, details of our romantic lives, these kinds of things. But we also have made this commitment so that our entire friend group knows we have chosen each other as our best friends. And then a lot of times it even manifests even farther for female best friends, where it's like, okay, you'll be my maid of honor in my wedding or whatever, right? Yes, my other friends are here as bridesmaids, but you're my maid of honor because you're my best friend. These are public declarations of commitment that I think would fit in Sternberg's category of commitment. That, I think female friendships display that in a way that maybe male friendships don't do it in quite the same way. And so he may not have really thought about that when he was describing companionate love. Also, I would like to throw in those arranged marriages again. You maybe start an empty love, and maybe as you get to know each other, you move into companionate love, and that may help to make it possible to develop passion so that love can progress. So again, I don't think he was thinking about other cultures and maybe some of their styles of love. Fatuous love is the kind of love that you get when you have passion and commitment. So you might have this sort of swept away whirlwind romance where, you meet and within a week you're married and you are completely convinced that you know the person well enough. But the truth is you really don't know them. You haven't had the time to develop true intimacy. And so what's really fueling this is the passion and then the fact that, a commitment has been made. Which, by the way, he would also, Sternberg did mention that, relationships that maybe started out with all three components present may bounce between companionate love and fatuous love, right? That, you've got the commitment, and sometimes you are able to talk and share ideas and really be intimate and, emotionally tied, but maybe you don't have the wherewithal for passion. Maybe you're really busy, or you just had a baby, or you're separated by a long distance or something like that. And then other times, maybe you don't have time to really connect intimately and emotionally, but you have, the opportunity to connect passionately. And so maybe you're experiencing some fatuous love during that time. So he did point out that, in a relationship that maybe has all three components, you might bounce back and forth between companionate and fatuous love. The other combination of two would be if you combine intimacy and passion, and that's what he called romantic love. And this is what a lot of people experience when they're maybe dating. So they haven't made a commitment of, marriage or moving in together or declaring each other exclusive partners or something. They're just sort of getting to know each other. They're feeling that spark. So they've got the passion, they've got the, at least the beginnings of intimate connection. And so at that point, when all we have are those two, he calls that romantic love. The goal would be to have all three present at the same time, and he called that consummate love. That's like the pinnacle. The goal is to have all three components at the same time. Like I said, you can have consummate love and then kind of bounce. As long as the commitment's there, it's always going to be bouncing between the companion and the fatuous, because you've got the commitment always there stable. And what's variable is the intimacy and the passion. So that's what can happen if you've made a commitment, right? Is that you can bounce with those two. Now, one of the things that's really important to note about Robert Sternberg's model is that he was trying to explain how he ended up divorced. Honestly, I talked to him protractedly at a conference, because he also has a it's not a triangle, it's a triarchic theory of intelligence. And so I approached him and said, how do you have these really dominant theories on both intelligence and love? Like, these are crazy. How'd these come together? And he said, yeah, like the two least studied areas. And he said he'd been doing the research on intelligence, and he turned his attention to love when he felt like out of nowhere his wife asked for a divorce. And he said, now that I've gone through this process and understood, these components, and put this labeling and explanation to it, I feel like now I understand that. I felt like, he said, he was very famous for his triarchic theory of intelligence, and he's flying all around the world. He's teaching at Harvard. He's, having quite the little jet setter lifestyle, and he's got a wife and kids at home. And he said, I always felt committed. We had the commitment. It was there and stable. And he said, I would come home from these trips and we would, reunite, and all this passion. And so I thought everything was fine. I had no complaints. Everything was fine. And he said, now in retrospect, I now understand what my wife was trying to tell me when she was saying, I don't feel like I know you anymore. We never share any intimacy. And he was doing what a lot of people do. He was thinking when she said intimacy that she meant sex. And he's like, well, but we just had sex. And so he didn't understand what the problem was. And then now he realizes she needed to connect emotionally. And he felt fine just connecting physically. And he didn't understand what was missing at all. And so now he has better insight into realizing that, you sort of need to balance all of it. You can't just sort of, it's good enough because we connected passionately, I'm fine. So I thought that was really interesting insight into how personal experience and what was going on in his life led to a very, well-regarded theory of love. All right. We're going to make a sort of abrupt shift to an evolutionary discussion of love. So I thought it would be fun for you to look at these 6 possible characteristics in a mate. And so I defined what a mate is at the bottom. It's a person to whom you make a commitment that you expect to be lifelong. And I would even like to go a little bit further. I mean, the word mate, if you use that term to refer to animals, you're usually going to talk about somebody who's making babies with another animal, right? And so I mean it in that way too, in this model. So I want you to think about a person who you would select from all the field of eligibles that maybe you would like to, if you're heterosexual, make children with. If you're not, maybe you would want to pick a person who you would want to raise children with. And maybe you're not thinking about children at all and you're like, I'm never having children. Pretend like you are. Go with me. Put your mind in that mindset. I'm picking someone who I plan on spending my entire life with and either making or rearing children with this person. So try to put yourself in that mindset. That might cause you to have to cast yourself forward 10 years, or it might have to make you say, what would it be like if I felt like I ever wanted to do that? So try to put yourself in that mindset. And then your job is to rate the 3 most important characteristics for you in your selection of a mate. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do is go into Canvas and answer the little survey. It's anonymous. I won't know who answered it. Well, I won't know what you said. It'll register some points for you, but I won't see who said what. So go answer the little survey and then come back and watch the next video that relates to this. Do the survey first, okay, so that I can have your answer before you've seen the theory. Okay, so go take that little, it's in the current module in Canvas. So go take that little survey and then come back and watch the next